Welcome, everybody. Welcome, Jamie.
Hi, how are you?
It's good to see you. I don't see a lot of people anymore.
I know, sad, isn't it?
It is sad. But in every storm, there's a rainbow. And I feel like this is something you and I have been putting off for a long time.
So true. And our
Um,
listeners are eager for it. And I feel like this is an awesome resource for them in this time where people are looking for information and have extra time on their hands because workflow isn't as consistent as it used to be.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. I find myself busier, but I'm definitely finding time in the day to do things like this, right?
Right.
Jamie Michelle Kane, why don't you tell our listeners who you are?
Sure. Hi, everybody. I am an attorney. I live in Buffalo. I work in Rochester. I went to school, undergrad and law school in Syracuse, and I'm from Long Island. And I'm a board member of our Capital Region Apartment Association called NICRA, which is one of the ways that I met Kara. Um, but is I like to represent that I'm a New York State gal, upstate, downstate, know it all through and through. I have a niche in multifamily law or law practice. I'm a general real estate attorney, however, so I do everything from start to finish in the real estate realm. I started in Investor Roundtable about 5 years ago. And so I have a real love and joy for representing investors, especially in the multifamily realm, and guiding them through how to purchase a building, how to lease it up, how to make sure that it's compliant with fair housing laws. I'm a fair housing trainer. And then obviously making sure if they want to have eviction services or if they need guidance to make sure that they are doing everything, like I said, compliant. We're really a resource for leasing, for acquisitions, for sales, for mergers, for corporate work, anything you can think of as it relates to investor relations. So that is kind of my wheelhouse. And I do work at a firm, so we are equipped to do everything else along with real estate law. And that's what I do.
And where can our listeners find you on social media?
Sure. So, first of all, I work at Boylan Code. So it's BoylanCode, and it's boylancode.com is my law firm address. People can email me at jcain@boylancode.com. That's my email contact information. But you can follow along on LinkedIn. I'm on there, Jamie Michelle Kane. I'm also on Twitter at Jamie Michelle. So JAIMEMICHELLE, the number 6. And then I am also now back on Facebook. I had to initially take it down for a little bit, but I'm back on Facebook at Jamie Kane. So again, it's Jamie, JAIME. Everybody gets that a little confused, but that's where you can find me. And most of the time I'm posting things on social media that are different from what I'm doing in other avenues, such as my roundtables or our podcasts.
Very cool.
Yes. Kara, why don't you tell me a little bit about yourself?
So I am an enthusiast for multifamily. Not nearly as long as you, but I certainly have lived in upstate the same amount of time. I work out of Albany, New York, cover many, many cities in upstate for RentPath, a digital advertising company. We have expanded our offerings over the last couple years, and you might hear me pepper things in here or there, but I'm excited to expand my horizons and really make this an extension of what you and I've been doing face to face in the markets for the last 5, 6 years. I think what's really interesting is definitely different legal mind, right? I don't have a legal mind, or nor am I an attorney, by the way, for everyone. I'm just a sales rep that spends way too much of her time volunteering and loving understanding the problems and challenges of her clients. So I've had the unique opportunity, as Jamie knows, to talk to clients and what their problems are on site at properties, partnering them with different vendors, partnering them with different solutions. But then also on the opposite end of the spectrum, a lot of my family and friends think I'm a real estate agent and that I lease these apartments. So I hear from them the challenges they have in getting in touch with you guys. So just a partner. a partner in all of this with everyone. And you can find me on LinkedIn, Kara Rafferty, on Facebook, Kara Wilhelm Rafferty. I do use that for a little more of my personal side. And then lastly, I think I'm Kara Rafferty1 on Twitter, but find Jamie, you'll find me. I'll link everything below. And then the last thing, I'm gonna spin this a little bit. We do have a sponsor for today, and I believe that's Under One Roof Coalition, right, Jamie?
That's correct.
Would you tell us just quickly, maybe 30 seconds, what's Under One Roof? How do we find them, and why should they care?
Sure. So for everyone wondering, Under One Roof is located at Under One Roof, so spelled out ny.org. What happened was in about April of last year, we got in New York State some indication that there was going to be proposals put into effect, which would change the way that landlords and tenants had the statutory laws, which are codified at the RPL and the RPAPL in New York State, changed. And there hadn't been a change in those statutory sections for about 50 years. And the whole timing of this was because the rent control laws in New York City and surrounding counties had their rent control laws expiring on June 15th of 2019. And so it was the perfect storm that had not existed in about 50 years, where we had a Democratic Senate, a Democratic Assembly, and a Democratic governor all come together at the time the rent control laws were expiring. And it was a perfect storm, which enabled sweeping legislation to be passed. And so we got a series of amendments in what was called the Housing Stability and Tenant Protection Act, or HSTPA for short, which again completely changed the way from an application stage through the eviction process. Landlords and tenants were now going to be subjected to the laws of New York State. And so as a reaction to that, we formed a coalition of landlords, tenants, and industry partners, because there were a series of unintended consequences that were a result of these laws that I don't think that the legislation was intended to do, obviously. And so it is a group and a coalition that has been fighting on behalf of, again, landlords, tenants, and industry partners, and not paid tenant advocates, actual tenants living in units in the state of New York, who are, facing strict challenges to being able to have choices in housing, and for landlords to be able to do their livelihoods the way they're normally able to do it without overregulation.
So we encourage all those listening, even if you're not in New York, this can certainly come to your backyard. So we urge you to visit underoneroofny.org, right?
Correct.
And check out the mission, check out what's going on. And if you like what they're doing, if you're in New York State or not, throw them a few dollars. Thank you for being our sponsor today, Under One Roof.
Awesome.
Okay. Topic time. We're going to try to keep this to about 20, 25 minutes each time, guys. This one could run a little bit long because we wanted to give you a sense of who we are. Again, I just want to reiterate that Jamie and I do both serve as board members for NYCRA, the New York Capital Region Apartment Association, which is now servicing all of upstate New York, Buffalo through Albany. And that is an affiliate of the National Apartment Association. So we may talk about those terms a lot, but know that we're both board members, we're both passionate, and certainly we urge you to talk to your own attorney. We urge you to talk to your own affiliate. We are never trying to urge you to make these decisions for your business that were the gospel. Right, James?
Exactly. And no, this is not soliciting business from either of us, but if you do need a resource, both of us are here and available to be resources for you if you're not otherwise represented or you don't have a representation for advertising or marketing.
Absolutely. We believe in giving back first and karma, and we're going to make sure that we do right by you guys first. And if there's business, great. If there's not, we're really just want to be a resource. It's kind of like a podcast. Yeah. All right. So today we are covering virtual leasing and virtual tours in light of COVID-19.
Correct. And so from my perspective, I'm going to let you take the charge on resources to do the virtual tours, because I know you have a whole bunch of things you want to talk about. From my perspective, what I'm going to do is I'm going to chime in where necessary to point out that this is a slippery slope from a fair housing perspective. And so the use of virtual tours, the use of websites, the use of going to a completely electronic mechanism for applications, all of that puts people with disabilities at a disadvantage for them to navigate those facilities online. And so we need to be cognizant and mindful when we're doing these things. How are we going to protect people with disabilities to make sure they have the same accessibility as somebody who doesn't have a disability navigating these virtual mechanisms?
Perfect. So we're going to talk through that definitely because we need to be cognizant. And it's also a tough thing to say, but I think it's the truth. I think our industry, Jamie, and speak to this, don't you think that we've been a little bit behind with our, everything from how are we going to approach reviews to reputation management to even just having a ADA compliant website. This is forcing us to, which is great.
Absolutely. We're learning that in our own business model that, oh my goodness, the startup and the, throwing it together at the last minute when we were told everybody had to close in New York, we weren't ready. I don't think anybody's been ready, whether it was, in our medical fields or in our legal fields or doing this. So I think, like you said, we take lemons and we make it lemonade, and we do what we can do now, learn the lessons while we're doing it, and move forward knowing that everybody will be safer and more educated as we progress through this kind of awkward time of trying to figure out how to go virtual.
Totally. So let's start there. I think that you just hit the nail on the head, and I'm going to say it a different way. Virtual tours before March 1. Let's just draw the line in the sand at March 1. Before March 1, I think virtual touring was virtual leasing, virtual touring meant one thing. And
Yes.
now it means another. So,
Sure.
I mean, as someone that, I'm advertising, you're legal, I'm marketing, you're, the attorney, how did you see virtual leasing before? I'm just so curious
So
in your point of view.
a novelty, right? It was, if you had awesome equipment and you were able to pay to get things 3D and panoramic, and I had somebody in my office who was, creating a company to do such a thing for apartments, and use really cool goggles that you could put on, and it would be like you were in a movie or a video game. I mean, those
Or like
kind of things.
drones, like drone
Yeah.
videos. Yeah.
Right. I think they were not the norm. They were, again, you were equipped. You had someone who was high tech and into IT on staff that could make it work. But it wasn't something that I went to every website and it was popping up at me, virtual tour. And certainly from the real estate agent world, it wasn't how they did their business. And now that has obviously changed. There's a complete shutdown, for those of you who don't know, for agents and brokers basically not allowed to leave their homes to be able to do any
Yeah.
part of their business.
Well, I think not just that, but when it comes to selling a home or leasing an apartment, I think a lot of owners, particularly in upstate New York, said, no, 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 we do not lease that way. We lease with our people. Our people
Right.
are our secret ingredient. Our people are the ones that make the difference. And now we have to persevere and find ways to show that personality. So we're going to talk about that today.
Sure.
And also, don't let me forget, I want to talk about making sure we communicate with them properly and that we're not violating any spam laws. So don't let me forget about that. All right. So let's first start with leasing virtually. I think it's really important, and you're really going to be giving us information on this. Doing the new prospect tours and signing the leases, the new leases. I mean, we got to get into that. But I think the question on everyone's mind is, we are going into, well, we're in looking season right now. There's looking season and leasing season. Wow, say that 3 times fast. And all this is doing is pushing looking season, right? But the problem with all this is the people that would re-sign and renew their leases April, May, and June, you need to notify, or you already notified. And what do you do? What do you do if that person? I've got 2 questions for you, Jamie. My first question is, what do you do if somebody said that they were going to vacate April 1 and May 1 and they just don't? And there's kind of two scenarios there. They don't, and you didn't have anyone looking to move in, or they don't and you already have someone moving in. And then question 2 that I'm just going to let you go right into after is, how do you handle a renewal right now?
Okay. So first first thing, I just want to give you the legal climate that we're in, right? So in New York State, for those of you watching out of state, again, your laws may be different, but in New York State, we have a moratorium on evictions and foreclosures that is going to bring us until June 20th. So we are no longer able to do any processing. Our courts are closed from the New York State. We're not even allowed to e-file right now. So we cannot do or process or file any eviction paperwork. We are not getting any court dates until after June 20th at the earliest. And that is subject to extension, obviously, depending on what happens here. So with that said, for those leases that are going to be expiring in April, May, and June, your concern should be, number one, if you sent a non-renewal, is it valid, right? And again, let's give you the legal context. So based on the HSTPA that passed in June, the new standard for non-renewals is that you have to look at the tenancy's duration in its entirety. Doesn't matter what the last lease term says, it's the entire duration from the time that tenant moved in until now. If that tenant has been there for a period of under 365 days, so 364 or less, you have to give them a 30-day notice. If they've been there for 365 days up until a day before 2 years, it's a 60-day notice. And if it's 2-year term or more that they've been there, then it's a 90-day notice. So all of those for April, May, and now June would have been noticed already. So people are asking, what's the validity of those notices? They are valid. The problem is that
and that's for non-renewal.
That's for non-renewal, correct. Okay. So those are valid non-renewal forms that you would have sent prior to the coronavirus and the essential mandate that everybody who is non-essential worker basically stays at home. Those are valid. The problem is your recourse to get somebody out doesn't exist until after June 20th. So even if you have a situation where a lease would be terminated and they'd be a holdover on May 1, we can't do anything legally for you unless there is a dire health and safety concern where we could file an order to show cause on your behalf with the court and an emergency situation to get relief. And even then, I think that your police officers are going to be the vehicle in which they want you to use to, arrest somebody who's causing trouble versus use the eviction, because it's just going to virtually take too long or be impossible.
And if you already had a warrant, you can't even enforce that.
You can't, right, correct. So not only can you not process new evictions, even if you had a warrant that was served or to be served, there's a stay on it for 90 days as well. So we can't do anything. And again, that mechanism, one of the parameters the court carved out was if there is a civil or housing matter, which is a post-eviction situation that requires relief, you can file an order to show cause in the state of New York. So again, that is something if there is, dire property damage being done, or if somebody is harassing people to the point where it's, an assault, or threatening people, or creating a situation for harassment and management. I think all those are valid reasons to which we could file an order to show cause and hopefully do a virtual court appearance to get rid of somebody or enforce a warrant if necessary to remove that person or have them arrested. With that said, there's also a couple of mechanisms for tenants if landlords don't do their job. So if landlords are letting code violations go, or if a landlord is not doing some kind of maintenance or conducting themselves with the proper responsibilities that they would have under the warrant of habitability, those are things that tenants do have recourse in emergency situations too, just in case.
Can we stop for a second? Because you and I do have compassion for tenants. We
Absolutely.
Do. So I think one thing that's on, and we're going to get into this in our next podcast about maintenance, right? But I just want to quickly throw out there to make sure any tenants that happen to be listening, what are landlords supposed to be fixing right now? I think the habitability is a huge question for them. So we could either go into that in full detail in our next podcast, or you could give me the quick version now.
I'll give you the really quick version right now because I know both of us are up against a deadline here, but we want to make sure that you are essentially writing a new maintenance policy right now. What I want to see my clients doing, and my advice to everyone listening to us, is create what's truly an emergency situation right now. All non-essential maintenance should be pushed aside at the moment and you should communicate that to your clients. It is at this time, based on the COVID-19 CDC and Department of Health guidelines, we are making sure that we are not entering apartments for non-essential maintenance. And then with that said, for maintenance, both to protect your tenants that you're going into and to protect your maintenance staff going into the tenants units, you want to make sure, in my opinion, and this is my opinion, this is, sort of a gray area and sort of controversial here. It is my legal opinion that you should be asking questions in terms of what the CDC guidelines are. Have you been to an outside the US area that was heavily impacted? So have you traveled to Italy? Have you traveled to South Korea? Have you traveled to China? Have you traveled to any other region basically in Europe at this time? Or have you gotten on a plane in the United States at this point in the last 14 days? You and I both came back from trips. I know I just completed my 15 days where I was, sitting in New York State, but or I should say in Buffalo. I just came back from New York City. I was worried for 14 days, am I going to potentially be symptomatic because I had gone and used, Ubers and gone to restaurants and gone to a bar. So, it is something that those are important questions that should be asked right now. Have they been subject to being in the proximity of somebody who was symptomatic, who was asked to quarantine? Are they experiencing symptoms? Do they have a fever? Are they, having a cough? If any of those are positive and affirmative answers that they're giving you, it is not that you're not going to go in and have their maintenance concern dealt with. You are going, in my opinion, again, this is my legal advice, you are going to call a third party equipped to handle that in your general area, who has the proper equipment, so proper ventilation mask, proper gloves to treat that positive or quarantine unit.
The less legal version would be you're still going to enter the apartment, but you just need to diagnose who is going to do the work.
Correct. And again, my recommendation is if somebody's affirmatively saying, yes, they're sick, they've tested positive, or they're subject to a quarantine period, you do not send your maintenance staff in there for OSHA guidelines reasons. You're subjecting them to high risk potential, disease that they can't protect themselves from, because it is my assumption that most landlords are not equipped with the N95 masks that they need and, gloves, because those are so hard to get.
Well, yeah, no, we're definitely at a deficit right now in the state. So we're just going to assume they don't have them. So, okay. So, all right. So let's stay on the renewal front. I'm sorry, I took you off for a second here. So you talked to us about, okay, if you had your notice out of non-renewal, where we're at now, it's kaput. You're stuck. Everyone's stuck. The tenants that wanted to leave, they're probably stuck. Who's going to move in this? And the landlords are stuck. So talk to me about the next step. If you want to renew somebody, can you do an e-sign? Can you electronic signature? Can you, what do you do? And can you raise rent? I mean, that's a great question. Can you raise rent? How do you get them to sign it? And how long do you need to do this for?
Okay. So again, I'm going to answer those questions. There is no current rent suspension in New York State as of March 25th, while you and I are talking.
At noon.
At noon, exactly, because it changes hourly. There is no rent suspension bill that's been passed. However, there is pending legislation which could change what I'm about to govern here as the law. So let's talk about those answers, and then I'm going to talk about the proposals on the table so that people understand what could happen and how it would affect what I'm about to just say. So for those of you who have expiring leases, again, my legal recommendation is, since you cannot move to evict somebody who holds over, and if you let that lease expire naturally, you will create a new month-to-month tenancy with that person that now is subject to the HSTPA guidelines of termination by 90, 60, or 30 days. What I suggest instead is to extend all leases in April, May, and June, which will effectively get you through the 90-day time period where we cannot evict anyone, keeping them on the same terms and conditions, which is goodwill, that you're not raising rents, in the time period of COVID-19 crisis. So you extend their leases, and Kara, if anybody has a need for what that looks like, we can certainly add a link for our documents that I'm willing to share. And you extend the lease term to get you through the end of June. Then we can reevaluate. If you extend it too long and then they breach that agreement, and you don't give them a curative time period, my fear is that we move into courts in, let's say, August, and the judge is going to say, wait a minute, I'm not entertaining any holdover or an eviction proceeding. You did a lease extension or payment agreement with them for 6 months. You got to wait till that expires. So short term is best method here.
Okay. So that also means that come July 1, let's be honest, a lot of the larger owners I work with, they like to spread out their renewals April through August or June through October. Those are really the heavy leasing months here. So then we're going to be moving into a new world where we're really doing a lot of 6 and 9 month leases. Would you see that being?
Or you can choose right now to alter your time period and you can renew a year. That's fine. There's nothing saying right now that you can't extend that lease for a year. And you could do it for the first 3 months to get you through where it's a non-renewal situation or a renewal situation without an increase in rent. And you can increase rent, let's say in September. You could do something like that. And that's, what I'm here for, to mechanically try and work out how do you structure a lease that does that and escalates rent. You can do that. That is totally on the table. I think for anyone trying to raise rent in the next 3 months, there is sort of a mindset of, is that, I don't know.
Ethically responsible? Is it ethically
responsible? Is it goodwill? Same thing with late fees. There's conversations back and forth with, should we be charging late fees? One of the things I do want to advocate for is keep in mind your small business landlords are struggling just as much as our tenants. And without cash flow to those people, you're not going to see your landlords be able to pay their maintenance staff or their operating cost, or even take a salary to pay their own mortgages at home. So, there's two sides of this, and it's kind of a balancing act of what's appropriate, and communication is key here. If, you're a small business landlord, communicating to your clients why you need the rent is certainly appropriate at this time.
Yeah, and we have a great letter that one of our board members and our committee chair and volunteer is sharing. I'm going to recommend that people, if you have questions, follow-up questions, maybe we'll end up doing, a quick 10-minute follow-up question for everyone that submits them in. And you can send me an email to rafferty2017@gmail at any time with any follow-up questions, rafferty2017@gmail. All right, so let's, again, talking off the cuff here, we're going to have to do a whole podcast on hoarding, I think, coming up. I think it's going to be a really tough time. I know myself, I'm not hoarding, but I certainly am holding on to more things, got a little more anxiety over what I can find. And I think that the mental health of your residents, of your tenants, is going to be, we should put that on the list.
Absolutely. Human contact is how some of us survive. And so not being able to see and interact with people in conjunction with not being able to basically go out of your house freely. And the weather, can we just talk about the weather? It is not cooperating in upstate New York for any of us. It couldn't come at a worse time for depression to set in. So very good point on that.
I also want to point out that we are using Skype to do this video call and record it. And so, you certainly need to notify upfront any resident. But, this is a way where you could utilize this and have a conversation with them and record it. And I certainly hope that no one uses those recordings for anything other than, just record. But I think a lot of the time you need to show your compassion. And the only way to do that is face to face. Don't you agree, Jamie?
Absolutely. And for those of you who do follow Under One Roof and you turn to my Twitter account, we've been using the hashtag compassion for tenants since day one when we rolled out our coalition. And that's just something that I will not budge on. Yes, I'm a landlord's attorney for, 99.9% of what I do. But for every landlord, there's a tenant that lives
Yeah.
in that landlord's building. And so it's a
Multiple,
symbiotic relationship.
multiple
Absolutely.
tenants.
It's a symbiotic relationship. Without a tenant, there is no landlord's business. And so we have to be working on behalf of both sides because they need each other. They want each other. And,
Yeah.
it is something that one cannot coexist without the other. So
And we were renters. We were renters
we
at one
are.
point.
Absolutely.
We rented every type of unit.
Every type. I mean, every type. If I showed you where I live in Syracuse now, awareness of what I was dealing with, I went through warrant of habitability issues and,
Yeah.
nuisance from other tenants. I actually had to vacate a house because of odors that were just not able to be sustained. My clothes were ruined. So funny stories for another time that we can share. But can we jump back? I'm going to hold us accountable now. We were going to talk virtual tours,
Yes.
and I think we get there in a minute, but I want to stay on maintenance topic because we have like 15 minutes together, and I want to just finish the thought so that we can get people this information quickly. As we talk about maintenance, and let's talk about quickly for somebody who tests positive, what do we do for the tenant there? And I want to make sure, again, we spoke about how we're going to get access and how we're going to treat maintenance, but what else are we going to do for that tenant as we're talking about compassion? Those tenants will not be able to leave their home. So how are those tenants going to get their mail, use their laundry, go get packages delivered to them? How are they going to get food? So these are the conversations that need to start to take place, and policies need to be drafted. I am recommending everybody do COVID-19 short-term policies that they exist for the duration of the state of emergency, and then they can be lifted. So you're altering your policies from a fair housing compliance to do things that you might not otherwise do. And so I have a trademark, let's call it, Jamie's ABCDEs. I like to always be consistent and document everything. And so when I'm talking about what we're doing on positive COVID-19 apartments, we are doing this for everybody who tests positive, for everybody who tells you that they have to quarantine themselves. So what you do for one, you're doing for all. So normally speaking, we say to people, don't take out someone's trash. What you do for one, you got to do for all. And you can't, as a maintenance worker, volunteer to take someone's trash out. But if you test positive for COVID-19, I do not want you taking out your trash. How are we going to do that? So those kind of considerations, and you and I have spoken about like the laundry room. What do we do for those people, and how do we go about making sure that they're as comfortable as they can be and they have basic necessities while they're sheltering in place?
So let me ask you this. So within your policy, I'm going, just asking questions here like we do normally. I've seen some really great things in the community where it says, hey, if you're able and you're healthy, or if you've recovered already, would you be willing to volunteer your time? Do you see that as being a policy short term where you could have a few residents that are willing and opt in to help with these things? Or do you think that staff members exclusively need to be doing them?
So that gets to the point of liability on the owner. Volunteers who could
and Jamie, I asked this because we have a lot of people who have single units, or they're not in a large building and they cannot get to those people 30 miles, an hour from their home. I only ask because why not ask?
So let's talk about it in the capacity of working for the landlord, right? So that person could volunteer to be a runner to Wegmans if they are comfortable going to Wegmans or any other supermarket in the area. And they could go get items for the person who cannot come out of their house. What I would say is just obviously basic sanitizing concerns then. As the person advising the volunteer, I would not want them to do anything other than, call the person in the unit and say, not even knocking on that door, just call the person and say, your delivery is right outside the door. And then that person could, open the door, get the items, and go back inside. I would suggest then, if that is taking place, that there is certain procedures in place to sanitize the outside area daily for the person that is subject to the quarantine, just to keep the area outside, because we're not doctors, right? So we don't know, and certainly landlords don't know. And the last thing I want is for liability to be on a landlord for making medical declarations or decisions. So we want to make sure we're just doing the most sanitation that we can do to a unit in common areas. I'm going to even do this. I'm going to suggest, you and I both know slip and falls on properties are prevalent in multifamily housing. There's large parking lots. Things can happen on
and
sidewalks.
we're going into that season right now with all of the rain, and it's cold, and then it's not, and there's snow. Absolutely.
Exactly. I'm going to go be bold in this assertion. I think at some point we might see a lawsuit against a landlord or company for failure to sanitize periodically. And so, much like snowfall, when you are snow plowing, it is my recommendation that you keep a chart of the common areas and what you're doing to sanitize those areas daily. Is that overkill? Absolutely. Am I the attorney who likes to do overkill, who likes to be bootstraps and suspenders? Absolutely. So it is my recommendation that people start to keep track of that. Like-minded, keep track of the materials you're buying for COVID-19 preparation and sanitizing those areas. So, if you're buying wipes, if you're giving gloves, putting up signs, everything you can do to minimize the negligence standard of what you could be accused of if you potentially have one of these situations arise where you can defend yourself and say, I did X, Y, and Z.
So real quick before we go to virtual tours, because we have to have a little time on that. There's a buzz going around. We have owners shutting down amenities that they need to, fitness centers, pools, that such. Rent cannot be discounted because these are closed, because your rent pays for your unit and that these are luxury amenities. Is that the accurate representation?
So that is my legal opinion, that rent is due. That is not what's happening though. So like you said, there is people asking for concessions at this point because they can't use the gym and they can't use, other facilities that, especially in warm climates, they could otherwise use. I think at this point it's, everything is being run on skeleton crew around the country. And I don't think that, we're seeing things get scaled back. Like, I'm not seeing my school taxes be deducted because you're homeschooling your children. That's the only real-time example I could give you.
That's a great example. That's a great example.
So bear with us, people. Tenants, we understand that, you want to go out, you want to use those recreational facilities. Landlords do not want to close these recreational facilities. It is for your safety that they're doing that. And I think that is going to supersede the rent deduction here, is that it's a state of emergency. Landlords are not doing this. They're being told to do this. I don't know what gym memberships around the country are doing. My guess is you are not going to be getting a per diem back for the time period which you can't use it. Maybe your gym memberships for April won't be charged the monthly charge, but this is full consideration. Your landlords are working extra hard right now to make sure you're safe. And I think that's the consideration for the full payment of rent until somebody says otherwise.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. So let's go to virtual leasing.
Okay.
All right.
We
So
have 5 minutes.
Yeah. So we're gonna do some links and we're gonna kind of throw this out there. So a few things. First off, I think the advice is you need to start recording these units. And there's a fair housing element that I'm going to let you speak to in a minute, but I'm going to take a few minutes to kind of talk about it from the advertising standpoint. Obviously, there's many ways you can do this for free. If you are of the mindset that you want a very professional tour, look up the great sites. The Matterport tours are excellent. You probably already have them. There's, Pinwheel, that's another vendor that you could work with. But then of course you have your free Google Hangouts, Facebook Live, Skype. You can do this in real time with the user, which I recommend with the potential prospect, or you can tape record. But today, I'm telling all of you, I want you to go out and at least have 2 or 3 tape recorded versions of your most popular floor plans. And obviously, you're not going to go into a home of somebody that already has one. But if you have to, I mean, obviously, Jamie, you can work with that resident to sanitize and try to get into one unit now, especially before someone's been in there for 3-4 weeks on their own. And, let's be honest, I'm about to pour my ice cream over my noodles. I'm, not really as concerned now as I was a week ago about my home cleanliness, except for sanitizing, of course. So, all right. So where I'm going with this is, from a fair housing standpoint, you got to show them, Jamie,
Yeah.
the same way every time. And we have to be aware of our disabilities, people with disabilities. So what are you suggesting we do when doing a video tour for someone that may have hearing impairments, sight, visibility
Yeah.
issues? Tell me what you think.
In my opinion, obviously, housing is something that's a necessity, and it is harder for a person with a disability to look for housing. So we all go to the internet as our first source. That's really hard for someone who is blind or deaf at the moment to be able to engage in the way that we're being forced to engage, which is virtual. So we need to be mindful of that. So my recommendation is, it's not that you can't do video tours, because that's what you're being forced to do. But when you're doing them, let's be mindful that people can't necessarily see what you're showing. So let's be descriptive. When you walk in to a home, I want, from the minute you open that door, to start visually and dimensionally giving what it looks like. So, for example, I'm walking in and I'm walking into a 30-foot wide opening, or I'm walking into a 60-foot opening, so that I know that's wheelchair accessible. I'm walking into the foyer. I'm walking in and I'm turning left into the dining room. The dining room is 10 by 15 with a window that faces south, and there's a lot of sunlight right now in it. It's 12:30 and sun's coming in. It has,
Or for you vampires that like to sleep in, this unit doesn't get as much sun in the morning. I mean,
right.
whatever you want to call
What
it.
direction it's facing, what are you looking, when you open the window, what are you looking at? What area are we in? Are we accessible to school districts, and what schools are there? How many feet are you from a playground? Or actually, I'm going to strike that. Don't do that, because that's steering. I help myself. But those kind of things, and that's a good what not to do.
Hey,
But
we're here
does
about
it have
what to do and not do.
right? Does it have sidewalks? Is there a backyard? Is the backyard fenced?
Well,
Those
okay,
kinds
wait.
of
So
visuals.
that makes great sense. Those are great tips. But let's talk about the community amenities. You do want to mention that there is a playground, a pool, a fitness center. You do want to
Yes,
mention these things, but I believe in prior discussions we talked about talking about them in the same order every time and in the same fashion. Is that accurate?
that's correct. Right. You wait. So to go back to my misstatement, which isn't really a misstatement when you think about what you just said, you just want to make sure you don't say this is great for families, because that's where it would be fair housing
Yes.
trap. But you can list off amenities. So you can just do what you just did: pools, recreational facilities that include gym, playground, dog
Mm-hmm.
areas, those kind of things, animal friendly, those kind of.
Yeah, so I think kind of the takeaways here, I know we're short on time, is pre-record these. Try to do them live when possible, but following the script that you've already put forth during your videos that you already did. I think have fun and infuse your personality, because
Yeah.
people are the best asset in any company. They show everything, and your leads are going to be way down right now, you guys. But I think there's an argument to be stated that those that are looking now are going to be high quality residents, and that everyone's at home all over Facebook. Facebook traffic is up 22% the last time I looked. So now is not the time to cancel and step back on your advertising. I just recommend you use your dollars a little bit smarter, and from any provider. But with that being said, it's time that you guys move into using text messaging and email communication on a whole nother level. I do want to quickly remind people that texting with your prospects and residents is a great tool right now, but you need them to opt in. Jamie, I think it's what, maybe you don't have this in front of you, but I think it's $1,000 per text for can
Yeah,
spam
per
law.
text for the TCPA violation. Yes. So, and keep in mind that is something I've already seen on the internet where, TCPA violations and COVID-19. So there are unfortunately predatory attorneys looking for these, much like they will be looking for the website accessibility lawsuits
Yeah.
also. And Kara, you and I know we're going to touch on student housing in another podcast. Perhaps we can dive in more to the website of
Yeah.
accessibility recommendations to make sure that this is not an issue, since we're just short on time right now.
Perfect. And if you're looking for a way to do this within the legal guidelines of that phrase that I can't say that you just said, to not get fined $1,000 per text, I am going to shamelessly plug RentPath because we are giving away 2 free months of the media center so you can communicate with your residents, with your prospects in a compliant way, and it's free for 2 months for anyone. And of course, today is March 25th. The offer is good until the end of May. So you can find me on LinkedIn to get more information. I don't care where you are in the country. I will get you to the person you need to be. Please utilize this so that you can talk to your prospects and residents in a way that works for you and not have to give out your personal info. You definitely don't want them to have that cell number after this is all over. So, Jamie, any final remarks for today?
No, everybody, I just hope you're, I'll end with, I hope everybody's doing the best they can under these extreme circumstances. Know that Kara and I are here from you or here for you. If you have, any podcasts or any questions that you want to hear us talk about, we are here to answer those and be a resource at this time. So let us know and give us feedback in terms of how we're doing and what you want to see going forward.
Absolutely. I hope this really helped you guys. We spent a lot of time on renewals versus your prospects. So maybe we can dive back into prospects on another podcast. But I do think those people are in your units for the next 90 days. So we got to figure out how to make the best for everyone. Jamie, thank you for your time. I look forward to going down this adventure with you.
Super fun.
All right.
Keep
Have a good day,
going.
everyone.
Bye.